Hello from Chicago. My name is Richard Miller. You're at Never Not Here. We're talking to a lot of people all over the world, and especially in this period is a very active period, full of energy and full of topics and full of discussion and new ideas that one source of information is not really adequate anymore, that we really have to discuss things between us and learn from each other. And so then that's what motivates us to keep roving around and keep our ears open and our mouth going, right? So anyhow, we're in Denmark today, so please help me welcome Carsten Bruhn-Henriksen. So
thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you for making this time and for coming on and for braving the internet waves. You know, I was saying the other day that how should I put it? We all have a worldview, and somehow that worldview makes us feel certain ways, because that worldview says everything is open and moving and we're free beings. Then we have a good feeling. And when that worldview says we're captive and enslaved and victimized, then we don't even have to be victimized. We could just be frustrated that nobody's doing it to us, but it still doesn't change, and I wish that was different, right? And so then somehow a good way to start is saying that our feelings and our moods may be a direct result of that, what I call the worldview. And we don't really know where that worldview comes from, because some of it's from our childhood, but some of it is just from the way everything seems to work. Do we just absorb it, reflect it, imitate it?
So your question is, where does it come from, or?
Well, just do you notice a worldview, or do you remember one, or do you see it in people? A worldview, of course, could just be like, what do you call it? Conditioning, right? I don't think that anyone's without it, but maybe you could say that no, you don't need a worldview.
No, there's like several answers to that question. Definitely, I have a worldview. I have the collective consciousness flowing through me as well as you do. And the way I take it down is different from the way you take it down. Then there's another option, and that is just to abide in presence. And doing that is when we kind of shut down the mind and just see things as they are. So there's not really any conditioning connected to that way of seeing. And so it depends on, do you say clutch in the mind? Do you clutch the mind in, or do you declutch the mind?
Well, you just mean to grasp your interpretations and kind of stand by them, somehow say that no, these interpretations are really what's happening. And so that is a clutching. Clutching just means grasping, or
no, it's more like the clutch in a car. You can clutch and declutch the motor.
Disengage. So it's like engage and disengage.
Yeah. It's like you can engage the mind, or you can disengage the mind. And when you are in a liberated state, then you are able to just declutch the mind or disengage the mind and just experience reality as it is. And you can do that while taking one breath. So the mind shuts down or shuts up. It's more appropriate actually to say shuts up and then shuts down, because it's always commenting, that mind always chattering. So the difference between being in a liberated state and being in what you call a frustrated state is that you're when you're in the frustrated state, you're not able to declutch the mind.
Right.
So that's really the difference, and that's creates a lot of frustration, because when you're attached to the mind and you're not able to shut it up or shut it down, then you're just, well, yeah, you're just listening to this all the time, actually. But then again, you of course have to ask yourself, who is observing the mind, or who is listening to the mind, or who is experiencing the mind. And that can bring you closer to liberation. So my worldview is of course based, when I engage the mind, it's of course based on my upbringing. It's based on my level of intellect. It's based on so many different factors of what I had to eat today, and so many other factors. Like there's like a trillion billion factors coming into play with every in every moment, and also that's in every manifestation of mind. That's the same thing happening. And then again, there's this possibility just to disengage, and that is the liberation. That's the freedom.
In a way, I guess you could say that's a subtle worldview, right? Because you're saying that number one, you can disengage thoughts or not pay attention to them, and then whatever was urgent is no longer present. So then, in that state, there's nothing more urgent than anything else, right? Or I mean, is something like that. But in the way I say it's a worldview is that, first of all, you say that that's a possibility, that without mind, you're noticing without mind, there's not so many priorities of or urgencies, let's say, call it. And also that that freedom somehow is desirable, because otherwise, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily move there unless you're saying that something about sitting with all the images that can flow through your mental apparatus. I don't know, there's some reason to disengage from that. So that's, I don't know, is that too much to say that's part of the worldview, or?
It's important to distinguish between what is flowing through the senses and what is then interpreted by the mind. When you disengage the mind, you are still very much alive, and you sense everything very vibrantly. But that's what is flowing to you through the senses. So you experience life as it is right in this moment through your senses still, but without the interpretation of the mind. That's the difference. When the mind kicks in, it starts to think about the experience. It starts to think about the sensations, compare them to, is this the same sensations I had yesterday? For example, eating a banana. You compare this banana in sweetness or ripeness with the one you ate yesterday, perhaps. And the mind concludes that it's either sweeter or less ripe than the one yesterday. But the sensations or the taste sensations experienced the banana can be had without that evaluation from the mind. So it's really just a tool we have that can help us in many ways, the mind. But the problem is that it has taken over, it's taken control, so it's not actually helping us all the time. It's actually doing mostly more damage than good, actually.
I suppose you could see that as a result then. If you're going to say that, then you can see as some result where somehow in a disengaged state, less damage is done.
Yes. But that's it could also be it could go two ways. Let's say that there's a mouse running across the room right now, and Bruhn, he is terrified of mice. Let's say that he has this conditioning that mice are deadly. They are so dangerous, they're gonna kill you. So when Bruhn he sees that mouse, he will make that interpretation consciously or unconsciously, and then that interpretation will create some thoughts, and that thought could be, "Oh shit, I'm gonna die," and that thought would create some feelings in my body. I would get tense. I would get fear flowing through the body. I would get anxiety. And the thought and that anxiety would feed back or reconnect back to a new thought pattern that would be, "Oh, I have to get away." So perhaps I would jump up on the chair that I'm sitting in, and I would yell and scream, "Help!" And perhaps the receptionist from the hotel here, she would come running and say, "What's happening?" So you see, the thoughts and the feelings, they go further in and manifest as words and action. The action is to jump up on the chair. The words are help, and our actions and our thoughts and our words, of course, they will somehow define our personality or our character. So if I'm terrified of mice, I have this fearful character, this fearful personality, and that personality and that character will then attract different impulses from the world, creating my reality. And as you see, the reality then feeds back again and creates another stimuli that could be something else than the mouse, perhaps a spider, which I'm also terrified of. And then we go through the whole circle again, or the whole cycle again.
Let me ask this then. Let's say that you're resting in somehow the mind has been disengaged.
Yes.
Okay.
A wonderful question.
No, let me just say one more thing. I'll just finish. And
okay.
And the mouse comes by, and a spider's there too. I mean, okay, you're in some kind of a peaceful state, and then when you see a mouse, your body's still going to do the same jump, is it not?
Let's just change the interpretation one bit, and I have another conditioning instead. So it would be, Bruhn has a conditioning that says that mice are the most fabulous creatures on earth. They are so sweet. So I've learned that through my conditioning, and when I see that mouse, I become so happy. I become, wow, what a mouse! And I just, that's the stimuli is the same. That's the mouse. The interpretation is different. That's the mice are wonderful. So the thoughts and the feelings that will flow through me is, oh, there's a mouse there. I have to give it some food. And the feelings would be love, and generosity, and I would my action would be to look in my pocket for what they eat, cheese. So I look in my pocket for cheese, and I take out the cheese and I bring it back down to the mouse, and it comes, and we become friends. And that creates a character, another character, which is a loving and generous character, personality, and that will attract experiences and incidences of much more positive character in my life.
Will it actually attract them? Will it actually attract them, or will it just interpret them as they appear?
If you definitely heard about the law of attraction, there's a movie called The Secret that you most likely have heard about, because most people in the spiritual community have heard about it. And I really, I can really not recommend that movie. It's a horrible movie, in the way that it's just like it describes the law of attraction, which is an ancient law and a profound law. in a way that is just about getting a new car or getting a new house and then attracting things by just visualizing it enough or saying it enough to yourself. That's ridiculous. It's a much more profound and much more subtle law that has to be investigated into much greater depth than what they do in that pop movie. So that was a little judgment there. So of course there's this law of attraction that if you're on a frequency which is a positive frequency, then that will resonate with positive people. Or if you meet a person who is pissed off, you will if you're very positive and you can stay in your positive vibration, then that will be contagious, and he will also get that positive vibe. So that's how it works. It's through resonance, really. Resonance is very well explained through just a metaphor where you have an instrument and you have this thing that you use to what do you call that?
Tuning fork.
Tuning fork, exactly. Yeah. So the tuning fork and the instrument, they go into resonance. They move on into the same frequency, and that's really what's happening. So higher frequencies can get lower frequencies up in frequency somehow.
Yeah.
If you really
that's an explanation. So then that explanation, in a way, helps people to say, well, okay, let me give it a try. Because you're kind of saying that you can see the effects of these things because resonance can happen, right? And you can give it a try in two ways. One is you can kind of have feelings that you want to feel more of and see if other people kind of pick them up. And you can also go to places and to people and to meetings and imbibe the so-called frequency or the good feelings that they have. And maybe even in a city. One city might be a dark industrial town where everybody's unemployed, and another city might be a bright modern town where there's lots of colleges and universities, and you can definitely feel the difference, right?
Definitely. That's the resonance phenomenon in action, definitely.
Right, and then in a way that's how we learn, because we're born into a family, and then that resonance is something that we imprint. We imprint, or we pick up, or we imitate, or we... So that's kind of, we don't even know where all our conditioning comes because of that that phenomena that penetrates, in that way. I think Cecile said porous. We're all porous to these we're calling vibrations.
Yes, definitely. And we pick them up, and especially children, they pick them up so brilliantly. I remember once my daughter Milla, she's now 10 years old, and when she was 6 months old, I was changing her diaper, and this was before the breakthrough in 2004. So my mind at that time was not very focused and not very, it wasn't very still, and I couldn't really be in presence a lot of the time. So when I was changing her diaper, I was thinking about everything else. I wasn't really being present with her. And then she was just all over the table, not really being quiet and still. And I was getting frustrated. Why are you not still? And then I suddenly found out, well, Bruhn, it's because you're not there. You're somewhere else. And then I put my focus into the action of being with her and changing her diaper. And she just reacted instantly, and she was absolutely still and peaceful. Mm-hmm. So it was really a great learning for me that this resonance phenomenon is happening, and children, they pick it up so well. They do not pick up what you say; they pick up your frequency, your resonance instead of, and that's the energy. So you can, perhaps if you're really frustrated and you put on a smile, they don't pick up the smile; they pick up the frustration. They pick up what's inside.
So it's kind of like a field of tension, that they some matrix of tension and lack of tension that seems to pervade the space. If there is even, maybe it's not even in space, but somehow it connects us from somewhere. And that you can extract, you can extrapolate tension to mean a lot of things like love and heart space and openness but anyhow, basically it's kind of like different kinds of tension.
Yes. It's different kinds of frequencies, different kind of vibrations. You can say that where fear and tenseness is a lower vibration, whereas as joy and openness and gratitude are like higher frequencies, have a higher vibration, and yeah, you can feel it in the resonance field.
Yeah, we say that a lot, higher and lower frequencies, but maybe it's even like. Maybe even with no vibration. Peace is like no vibration, right? Because it doesn't need one. No. It doesn't need one, right? Peace. It's a warm vibration, right? So there is a vibration then.
There's always a vibration. No vibration is not actually able. We're not able to have no vibration in the manifest world. But peace of let's say of an unmanifested kind doesn't have a vibration. That's correct. But as soon as it manifests, that peace from let's say the unconditional peace, when it manifests, it has a vibration.
So is unconditional peace when the mind is quiet?
Yeah, you could say that. Yep. Then you rest in your true nature, which is unconditional peace and presence. But Richard, I would like to get back to your question really with the mouse. So we had a negative interpretation, we had a positive interpretation, and we saw that there's a difference in the effect, in the consequence.
Right.
Definitely, the whole reality changes with the interpretation. That's really the important link. That's the interpretation, definitely. But there's also a possibility of having no interpretation. And that's not when we're on autopilot. Some people, they say, oh, I know that when I'm spaced out, there's no interpretation. But that's not true. That's just unconscious interpretation taking place. When you're truly, truly present and you are abiding in your true nature, which we all are able to do, but we just have to really realize that we are that. Then we rest in a place where there's no interpretations, because the mind is not really active in that way. So we just see things as they are. They do not. They are not. They are not. Yeah, they're not being manipulated. They're not being observed. They're not being evaluated. What is happening? The experiences. They're just being experienced. Nothing else. And just true and direct experience. That is utter bliss. It is so fabulous. It is. Yeah. It's the meaning of life. Just experience without interpretation, really. It doesn't mean that we cannot experience joy and happiness and wonderful things with interpretations. We saw that before with the positive interpretation, filled with love and gratitude. That's wonderful, and it can create good feelings. But it's not the same as really just being with what is from the heart directly.
So somehow that's interesting, right? Just being with what is with the heart is interesting. And what I want to say, I mean, like, there's an attraction to it. What we are interested in, somehow our attention moves toward that. And so still, I don't know, does that change our life? I mean, we're still alive and we're still doing what we always used to do in a way, especially if we have relationships that, blood relationships that are not going to go away, like children and sick parents maybe or something, or we feel that bliss and that peacefulness, but yet we're still in action. And I don't know, I guess that action is not really rejected in any way, because I don't want to say it's not motivated in any way, because it's motivated by the fact that that's my child. It's motivated by the fact that that's my mother, that she's not so well, you know. And then these are just, of course, conventions, I guess, that we pretty well honor. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of feeling to them also. But in other words, we have a certain socialization that moves along within that spaciousness. Mm. And apparently it helps, right? The spaciousness helps the socialization, or otherwise we wouldn't go there.
Definitely, it helps the socialization so much. When you move into spaciousness, when you move into the vastness, you move into your heart, and from there you can socialize in a much more profound, loving, and also intelligent way. I would more say wise than intelligent, whereas intelligence, as in IQ, is very much connected with the mind and the intellect. Then wisdom is much more connected with the heart. So we would be able to socialize in a loving, more wise, and more connected way when we socialize through or with the heart. It's important to understand that the shift that is happening, well, the way I usually explain it, the shift that happened to me in 2004, was that before that shift, I was, let's say, 10% heart and 90% head. That's where my energy was. Then it shifted so that I became 90% heart and 10% head. I could still use my head and I could still use my mind, but it didn't preoccupy anything, the whole space anymore. The heart does. And the heart is what makes us experience things directly. The heart is where all the acceptance and the gratitude is. It's where unconditional love lives. And it is the biggest blessing you can imagine, really, that is to make that shift. But it doesn't mean that you exclude the mind. It still has a function somehow, but it moved from being 90% to 10%.
That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing, because sometimes, well, just as a metaphor, I'll say sometimes we speak of the middle way or something like that. And so then you might think, well, the middle way, I mean, the head is useful, the heart is who we are. The middle way might be 50-50, you know, and then, and you might even think about masculine and feminine and saying, well, you know, some people are confused as to what sex they would prefer to be or something like that, or you know, we take on more masculine people maybe take on more feminine, or more, you know, to a certain extent, having children and stuff, take on more receiving and loving and serving, and if those are feminine. And then we might think, well, that doesn't mean they're going to flip-flop, you know. It just means that they're going to be maybe 50-50, you know. They'll be able to identify with both aspects. But you're saying that it really just flipped over. And I don't know, is that like a reaction that will sometime come back to being 50-50, or is that just like, or do you have to hold on to that 10% for dear life, or it'll be 99-1, or what's going on? I mean...
Well, what is important to understand is it's difficult. It is again it's about interpretation, like we talked about before. When you interpret the 90-10 that switched to 10-90, then it sounds like the mind is I just became very, very stupid. But that's not the case, actually. The case is that I'm able to use my mind much better than I was able to do before. Because I can focus, I can concentrate much better, because I'm not like all over the place in the mind. and the capacity of the heart that now came into play, I would much more say that it's now, well, let's say with the capacity that Bruhn has, then it's 100% heart and it's 100% head. Whereas before it was perhaps 40-40. Now it sounds weird, but when I'm talking about 10-90, it's how much energy each entity takes up, or how much it fills in my reality. And now the heart fills 90%, and the head or the mind fills 10%. But when I engage the mind, it is much more sharp, much more profound tool than it was before, actually, because it's balanced. It's not influenced by all the negative interpretations, feelings, and thoughts.
That's a good explanation. That really feels clear and feels useful and feels like, you can count on it. And you don't have to really adjust the percentages or anything, you don't even have to be involved.
It's like you go to 100-100. You still have all the capacity of the mind and much more, actually, and then at the same time you open up your heart, and that becomes so alive and so flowering. So it's coming up to 100-100. But then I have to add that then people say, okay, if you're at 100-100, then you're at the end of the journey. No. It's never stopping, this journey, because consciousness, the journey into consciousness is unending, and it's so vast. There's so many aspects of consciousness on the physical plane and on the non-physical plane. So it's a never-ending journey. And I just went from kindergarten to first grade, I think. I skipped kindergarten. That was, I came out of kindergarten, and I was living in the mind. And now I'm in first grade, and there's so many grades to explore.
Probably. Because like we say, a lot of times people say the only thing that's constant is change, like as if there was a law of the change of the universe. And then other people say, or the same ones even, they might say, what doesn't come and go is real. And so what doesn't come and go must mean it's always here. And I guess maybe that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't change, but at least that aspect of it, that always being present, doesn't change. And so then that kind of comes into our vocabularies as a paradox. And but what doesn't come and go? I mean, is awareness constant? Or, you can't really see the constancy of it because we judge constant by content. And content shifts, and so then it gives us many points of reference, all those shifts. And maybe consciousness is a point of reference, but it's not a point, so it's not even a reference in a way, because it's never gone. I mean, does that make sense, or is that well said or useful or not?
It makes sense, and it is correct. The problem with words is that they cannot really describe this. Just like if you wanted to describe how an apple tastes, then you couldn't describe it. Without
only with points of view. You'd have to describe it with points of view.
When you talk about coming and going and change and so on, definitely that is also a part of my reality. I see change everywhere. After the shift, I became much more clear on what is changing. But that was because I became aware of what is beyond change. And it's not really correct to say that it's not change, it's beyond change. And awareness or presence is beyond change.
How about saying it's before change?
Also that. Both. Beyond and before. Yep.
I've been talking to a few people, and we've been saying, okay, well, one thing we could say is there's a lot of teachings, and they've been taught for a long time. And then somehow we record things in a way where we can have access to those teachings, at least the conceptual part of it, and maybe the mastery. Those people that talk about lineages talk about a master that has also the resonance that he's, what should I say? He's, in a way you can't store it in a book, but you can store it in a life. And so then the idea of a lineage means that a resonance can be passed down. And so then, I don't know, these teachings, I guess up to a point, are useful.
Definitely. Teachings are wonderful. I'm a great fan of teachings. Especially the teachings of the Buddha, also the Christian mystics are fabulous teachings. So there are so many teachings that are worth looking into, definitely, and we all just have to really taste and invite teachings in that we kind of feel resonance with. So there's so much to learn there, and then we have to realize. That's what I realized actually. I was before the breakthrough. I had maybe studied, I think, more than 300 books on philosophy, spirituality, and psychology, and it was none of those books that actually set me free. I couldn't say that I shouldn't have read them, but some of them actually put me more into the prison than set me free, because I kind of had this those spiritual insights, or which were kind of intellectually based. And when you break through, you realize that it has nothing to do with how well read you are or how well studied you are. You have how much you have studied. It's something else that sets you free, and we could call it grace, we could call it source, we could call it Holy Ghost, whatever we feel like calling it. There has to be that extra entity.
So what I was saying with this, I think I had more than one conversation like this, and we've been kind of noticing in ourselves, and maybe it's just our beliefs or our projections, but we've been saying that okay, there's a lot of teachings, they've been taught for a long time, but somehow we feel that this teaching is going to go through a really big change in just these short few coming years. And I don't know if you feel anything like that, or I don't know whether that comes from feeling that teaching is deficient, or feeling that so many people are misled, somehow confused by what is said, or they grasp it in a way that it wasn't intended. Or just like you said, you read 300 books, and some of them even put you in a bigger prison than took you out. So then those teachings should somehow be thinned out a little bit, I think, and maybe...
No, because everything is necessary, also the ones that imprisons us. Because just like, let's just look at this. There's a lot of food we take or we eat, which is actually putting us into prison also. But as this is also a part of the learning process, we have to experience that. So of course we can say that there's some foods or books that are not wholesome for us, but in the long run, when you look back, then you find out that everything that has happened to you was a precious gift. Also the ones that created more confusion or conflict in you.
In a way, a teaching is like a prepared porridge. It's a food that's being given to you, and so it's come from a source, and it's going out to the many, one to many. And what we're doing here isn't really one to many, because you're not telling me and I'm not telling you anything. We're just discussing stuff, and people are listening, and maybe light bulbs are going off in their head, or they might just say, or they're having their own internal dialogue, which is part of our conversation actually, but we're not privy to that part. But I mean, that's quite different than a lone man in a monastic cell reading the Bible or reading a scripture, or somebody, I don't know. It might even be different than somebody sitting on a cushion and staring at a white wall.
Mm. But I think we all go through what we have to go through, and the one sitting looking at a white wall has to do that, and the other one who's studying the scriptures has to do that, and we do it in different times of our lives. Or if you take the life as the huge life, the big life, which is all the different lives in that. So the whole evolution process, then everything has to be there somehow. Also, all the bad stuff.
In a way, it has to be there, but in a way, nowadays it's with our choice, right? Because in the old days, let's say, at least the history or the traditions where you go to a master, he says, okay, go sit by the fence for 12 years. And then, you come back and say, I did it. He says, okay, go do 100,000 prostrations as you walk, from here to Benares and back, and yeah. Then you come back in 10 years and it always seemed like somebody else's prescription, right? That's the story, whether that's true or not, I don't, or whether that's just a fancy story, I don't know. But now it seems like all that stuff's there, and some things are the mode or like fashion. It's fashionable to listen to Nisargadatta or something like that. And then, maybe at another time he was even invisible because nobody had written his book yet and only a few people had seen him, And who knows, maybe in a couple of years that won't be the fashionable anymore, and then something else will be happening. And it's not that we need to touch everything, but somehow we just need to follow the fashion, I guess, and follow what other people are doing. Somehow we follow it, or like we imprint it, the same thing as the resonance thing, and then that's what gives meaning to our lives.
It sounds a little bit to me like you think it's happening just by chance, and it's just like coincidences happening, and we move with that fashion, and then we move with another fashion. In my reality, everything is dead on precise. Everything, every single moment has a quality, has a meaning in it, which is just we cannot really grasp it with our minds. How much meaning there is. Also, the double cheeseburger from McDonald's, which is really poison food for both spiritual progress and for your physical body. But it has a purpose. You have to really experience that before you can say, okay, I don't need that food anymore. I'm not gonna eat it. I know what it did to me. I learned my lesson somehow, and that is a part of the learning process. So and when I look back, so many times during the process, I was like, what the hell do I have to do this for? Why am I experiencing this kind of suffering? I don't want this anymore. And now when I look back on it, it's just like it makes so much sense. It was so precise. It was an intelligence beyond comprehension that created that learning setup, really.
Maybe we don't have to say things like that, that everything is right, and maybe we don't even have to know. Maybe that's just an explanation that maybe helps us sink into our own life and just be with whatever is, in one way. But if we extrapolate that same kind of idea and say, well, in all the history books that we can gather, there's been tons of wars every year, and then some people might be tempted to extrapolate and say, well, that's all what we needed to learn. And true, we are learning out of that, but not very fast, right? Until somehow the wars get more and more out of hand, or otherwise, something that we've learned is to kind of ignore it or push it aside. Like I would say, people in the U.S., until Vietnam, really, we weren't really too much conscious about war, and then only as a lot of people demonstrated against Vietnam, and of course I didn't demonstrate. I was in the army. I didn't like it though, and but I mean, in other wars after that, and even the Gulf and all that stuff. I mean, a certain amount of people demonstrated, but a certain amount of people were numb to it and thinking, we got to get those bad guys, and believing the story and believing on the war on terrorism, and then. Our whole kind of mentality in the U.S. is like, what can we be against, because we have the war on drugs and the war on poverty and the war on cancer and the war on every last thing. We have a war, and then the war on crime, and we have more prisoners than anyone in the world. And, we got bigger penitentiaries and so on. And so then we're numb to that stuff. And then if we're saying, well, that's all perfect, because like, I hate to say that, I hate, that's what it gets, but it's kind of leads there, that we needed all that stuff to learn. Maybe it's true. We are learning because of all those excesses, but I mean, couldn't there be an easier, softer way?
Definitely, but not in this setup. This school is like the hardcore school where you really learn through suffering, and you learn the phenomenon of duality, of the bad guy and the good guy. It's just like the movies. Let's take a movie like The Matrix. You've seen that?
I'm not a real movie person, and I kind of embarrassed to say no, but maybe I have actually on television or something seen it, but I mean, I forget exactly. I never followed the plot, but I guess things could just appear and not be there, but they were always, I don't know what it was.
Okay, but let's take another. What could that be? Star Wars or?
Oh yeah, I could go for Star Wars.
Yeah. This where would Luke Skywalker really be without Darth Vader? You see, the Darth Vader is actually facilitating Luke Skywalker's evolution process, his growth as a Jedi Knight. And he wouldn't be able to go through that process and that fast development without Darth Vader there to put the pressure on him.
Yeah, so, it sounds very biblical, because it's so good and evil. It's all about good and evil. Where would Adam and Eve be without the snake, right?
Yeah. So it's just to really, from a transcendent point of view, to embrace both sides, because they create that dynamic, they create that tension, which creates evolution, and an evolution in consciousness, and evolution in intellect, and in physical abilities, and so on. So that's beautiful. But it's not to say from the dualistic point of view that we should embrace and encourage more evil and more ignorance.
Well, it's yeah, but it almost sounds like we should just have a hands-off policy and just let it go the way it's going.
No. We have to play our part, just like with the 99% movement, Occupy Wall Street. Somehow, I think that's a beautiful example. We have the international banksters on the one side, and we have the 99% on the other side. It's another dualistic setup. If you look at it, the 99%, they've said yes for so many years to more materialism, to more money, to better wealth or higher wealth and welfare, and we've just like kind of accepted and played the game that the international banksters they set up. So we've definitely been participating in that game.
I'd like to go into that a little bit myself, because I have been kind of studying it, because I'm very interested in Occupy myself, and it was Occupy that really kind of stimulated me to take a deeper look, or even a look, because I wasn't really looking. And I did study, for instance, most of the excesses in banking came from the bond market, because there's a stock market and the bond market. I'll just explain this because it's not all that hard, and I think it's kind of interesting. In the stock market, at least here in the States, we think that could be a consumer market, because individual homeowners and so on could actually invest in the stock market, and that was believed to be, divide the ownership of the goods of America, and that was our opportunity to do that. And but the bond market is like what do you call it? An institutional market, which means like you can't even play a game in there unless you have 50 million or $100 million. You know, if you just have 10 million or 15, they don't even get lost. You know, and so the bond market was just totally asleep. You know, it was like it was just a fixed, sleepy investment. You would buy a bond, you get 5% interest. That's it. There was nothing else to do. And then when it ran out, you'd buy another one, right? And 10 years, or if it was a 30-year bond or whatever. And at that time, the economists were keeping the interest rate steady. They didn't change it. So then the bonds were just, that's it. They were just kind of dead instruments. Now, in 1979, our Federal Reserve Chairman, Paul Volcker, said, okay, we're going to change the thing instead, because they were adjusting society, they were adjusting the economy by the money supply, by adding more money into the money, printing dollars and then taking them back, and then printing dollars and then taking them back. And if there was a recession or an inflation, they would adjust the money supply, see? And that kept the bond market totally dead, see? And then he said, oh, we're not going to do that. We're not going to change the money supply anymore. We're going to change the interest rate. And then they got this thing where they put the prime rate up and down. Well, when you move an interest rate of an economy, a bond with a fixed interest rate grows in value or shrinks in value. I don't know if that's too complicated, but just to make it simple, it does. You know, they threw a whole variation quotient in the bond market. The bond market since then has been a wild trading speculation scheme. As soon as they started to figure it out, and all the excesses, you know, from the savings and loan, from the corporate rating, from the bank bailouts and the mortgage-backed securities, and all those things were the bond market right there, you know. And it's a liar's market for sure, you know, because I was reading these books and it really told what kind of guys were in there, you know. Really, I don't know, like it was worse than the Animal House or fraternities or something like that, you know. Just totally guys that are wild with no inhibitions whatsoever as far as, you know, selling a real windfall nothing, you know. And so just by what I'm saying is an institution was changed by one thing. It was just said, okay, instead of changing the money supply, we're going to change the interest rate. And that created a huge multi-trillion-dollar fiasco, one after another. So then why is that a necessity? I mean, that institution could be readjusted so that doesn't, you know, that doesn't have that speculative possibility anymore. And why not? I mean, why does it have to be that, now we have this wild speculation at the core of our world economy, which is some people are just gambling with the planet Earth. I mean, I don't see that Definitely. That's a necessity. And I don't see that that's, comes from source, or that that's some kind of holy thing. I don't see anything holy about that, you know, whatsoever. And I say that, you know, it only happened because nobody was looking, right? Nobody was really kind of putting two and two together to see what that meant when they made those changes. And of course, gradually, it took them a while to figure it out too. But I mean, certainly we weren't looking.
Richard, from my point of view, it's much worse than you describe here. It's like you describe something happened by mistake. These people who are behind the international, what I call the international banksters, they know exactly what is happening. They rig the game. They just make all these high peaks come, and then it goes down into recession. And they do that more and more often now in order to create, let's say, a big recession where they can actually take over power of both countries and also people, and create some kind of, let's say, one world government, which is worse than Darth Vader.
Yeah.
In a way.
I see that possibility too, you know, more than I've ever seen it before, because I never wanted to look, you know.
Yep.
And but in the meantime, I think it's they are playing in more or less inside the institutional rules. You know, they're not really just walking down the street with guns and tanks and ripping people off. They're ripping them off with instruments that they create that somehow are in the legislation, you know. And
no, they change the legislation all the time, but then they kind of get consent from the people. They get consent, and that's what they want to do. If they don't get the consent from the people, then they will put in the military later. So they just want to create a situation where we are poor enough to say that, okay, we surrender all the power to you and you can do whatever you feel like, just as long as we get our iPhones and Big Macs back. And that's what they're really somehow trying to do, in my point of view.
Somehow I'm not so against consumption, and I think consumption can be made in a way where there's total sustainably, right? Like, I mean, if we all had, like Denmark has got a lot of wind power, for instance. So then if there's enough wind power there, then turn on the lights in the house and, use it. And
definitely.
And you don't have to live like a caveman or something like that.
No, we could live in great wealth, all of us.
Yeah, so then talking against consumption, I don't like to talk directly against consumption, but I like to somehow... talk about sustainability and things like that, for sure, and what holds us back from sustainability, because like the only thing that really holds us back in society is our infrastructure is set to do a certain thing. And the people that own that infrastructure, they don't want to, they're not ready to write it off yet and say, no, we're not going to do it this way anymore. They're out to use that infrastructure until it all gets used up. And they're still building more of the same, actually, and still building more big cars. And of course, in places where there's energy shortages, they're building more. Like I was in India 2 years ago, and they're building maybe 100 coal-fired power plants. It's going to be an amazing thing that is going to go all over the world, all this, carbon and, what they call greenhouse gas and stuff.
Terrible. But why I mentioned this example with the international banksters and the Occupy movement is really just again to see that if the Occupy movement moves into reaction, moves into war on the 1% or war on the international banksters, then they're just playing the same game, the dualistic game. What we have to do is, from the 99% perspective, we have to embrace the whole thing. And act from a place of acceptance, full acceptance, knowing that we created the international banksters through our own greed also. So it's like a collective phenomenon. There's no enemy out there. We have to address the enemy inside first, and we have to accept that part of ourselves first before we can move into any resolution, before we can move into oneness.
So in the beginning,
it has to happen.
Go ahead.
It has to happen by the principles of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, where it's nonviolence, but still pointing out the madness that we are acting out.
I don't know. Can you say Gandhi accepted the British rule? I mean, he didn't really accept it because otherwise he wouldn't have been out on the street. But he stuck to nonviolence, okay, but he didn't really, and same with King. I mean, King was out there trying to change the rules and trying to do practical things, and always making his presence felt, saying that here we are and we're not going to go away, and let's just, you guys, listen to us, please, listen. And but still, that's not the same thing as accepting. Or was he finding the racism in himself, or not really? Maybe, I don't think so. I mean, is that a little different?
Good point. It's a good point, very good point. The acceptance is of the other person. It's not of the behavior. You do not appreciate, you do not accept the behavior in a way that you say, okay, just go on doing this. That's not what it's about. The acceptance comes from a deeper place where you accept that this is the situation, you accept the other person as he or she is, and then you address what is wrong. If it happens as a reaction, if it happens as opposition, then you will only create action and reaction. It will not create true change. So true change, it starts in acceptance of the situation as it is right now, but not in the way that it should continue to be that way, that we should change the situation, we should change the behavior, definitely. But it has to start in acceptance that's why I'm talking about it has to happen in the 99% movement, and also when that happens from the heart, we are in that acceptance, but the heart doesn't exclude change, not at all. It facilitates true change, but it has to happen from that place in us.
Yeah, so in other words, that change is actually, when it comes to agreements in society, that change has to be focused through mentality. And so the heart doesn't preclude mentality or ideas.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't rule out those. No, exactly.
But sometimes in the beginning, when we are not used to the heart, we might feel like we have to kind of preclude thoughts in order to really feel what is in our center. And so then that might be just an exaggeration to get the hang of it.
No, that's again an interpretation which is not correct. The heart can include everything, also thoughts. But the thing is that we do not move into our heart when the mind is preoccupied with too much stuff. We cannot move into the heart because it holds us. It holds the control of us, the mind. So in order to really access the wisdom of the heart, we have to still the mind. Then the other faculty opens up. And so it's important to understand that the heart doesn't exclude thoughts. It's not the opposite of thoughts. It includes everything.
That's interesting. It's not the opposite of thoughts. I'll just share this, like when we were talking about Gandhi and just then, and I was kind of visualizing a lot of chaos there. And I went through a shift, like my mind just stilled like that. And it's been that way for a few minutes. And so then when we were saying things like, in the beginning, we were talking about declutch the mind when we were saying disengage,
Yes.
And so then we were saying that that's something that we can learn. And then maybe you learned it and maybe you practiced that, right? I don't even know, But then at a certain time in 2004, or however that went, some shift occurred in you and you said it wasn't really an outcome of reading books and things you were doing. So that it's not that necessarily we declutch the mind or doing that. If we learn a trick to do it, it's not really, that's not it, right? Or I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, that's beautiful. You just hit the spot or the nail right on the spot, or the head. It's you cannot do anything. You cannot learn this. You can only be it. You cannot do anything to move into the heart. You can only let it unfold. And it is a surrender process. And then people, they ask me, Bruhn, how the hell do I surrender? And then I say, I'm sorry, but it doesn't work like that, because you have to be surrendered. And then they say, oh shit, then I'm trapped again. It is this thing, you have to do everything you can, and then you have to let go. And I can explain that was what happened to me back in 2004. I had, for 7 years, 10 years, I had an intense spiritual search. And I was experiencing a lot of beautiful stuff in my life. I had what I perceived as a wonderful wife. I had the car that I wanted. I had the house that I wanted. I had the job that I wanted. Everything was actually very good in my life in that way. But I experienced a huge meaninglessness as an undercurrent in my life. And that what really kept me on the spiritual search, or on the spiritual track, because I just wanted to really get rid of that meaninglessness. And so I did all I could. I did everything I could. I practiced yoga a lot. I did a lot of meditation. I went into retreats for a long time, and I was just doing everything I possibly could. But none of that set me free. it wasn't until I actually surrendered. And that happened not as something I learned to surrender or I learned to let go. The universe gave that to me in the way that I moved into depression. I thought, okay, now I'm gonna get enlightenment. Now I'm gonna really achieve it through this process, I thought. And nothing happened. And as nothing happened, no big spiritual experiences or anything in that process, I moved into like the biggest depression for one day. And when I woke up the next morning, everything had changed. The perspective had changed 180 degrees. I had changed from living in the head to living in the heart. Before I was visiting the heart sometimes, but living in the head. Now I moved into the heart, and now I'm visiting the mind instead, or the head instead. So what I want to emphasize is that the surrender wasn't anything I could fabricate, anything I could do. It just happened. And everything changed.
Sometimes people share about an intense activity, and then somehow that a breakdown of that, and it seems like that this surrender can come by some kind of a bursting or collapsing or something like that, or you know, just really a true total giving up, like, oh no, I like never can do it. And I don't know if that's a realization or just a tiredness that brings that about. But I was wondering, you know, maybe because like we say, you got to surrender, but if you think you have to surrender, if you think you have to love, if you think you have to if you say you have to say yes, all these things are kind of like have a motivation, and because they're motivated, they're also measured. So then you kind of look over your shoulder and say, I'm doing it pretty good. No, it's not going good at all. You know, I mean, you're totally into kind of like the utilization factor there and trying to. But I mean, can't you just say like, okay, like surrender's already here, actually. You just notice what's already here. Maybe it'll only show up by a little peep, you know. Maybe it's so covered up that you'll only see a little corner of it. But, you know, you can notice, you notice that it's already here. Surrender's already here. Love's already here. Peace is already here. And all those things, you don't try to do it, you know, or try to attain it. But instead, you just say, well, notice if it's already here, because I think it is. If you just quit trying everything, and then little by little, let it kind of poke a bigger ear up, and you'll say, oh, it's getting bigger and bigger. I don't know. Could that possibly be that it could be actually gradual like that, and you could just kind of not have to explode?
So many ways of moving into the state. I'm sure that several people have experienced that path also, where you just gradually surrender more and more into what is.
Again, not surrender more and more, because if you say it that way, you think you're doing it. But if you say, just notice that you are surrendering more and more, you know, where you are, you know, you just notice the part that is. You don't have to say the more and more part. And then you'll just notice that point, you know, and that's kind of like a turning point where you can see, oh, now, oh, this is surrender and this is not. Oh, this is where. And then when you can notice going back, because so many times it seems like we find ourselves somewhere when we, you know, like, okay, the more abstract we get and the more we want, our focus is off of what's going on here and now. And then we find ourselves sometimes in an open space and sometimes in a closed space. Well, we never figure out how we got from here to there. And that's always like a mystery, you know. But it seems to me if we could find that turning point, you know, and just see it ease in and then say, oh, that's the key. If I just stay there, I know when it starts to flip like this, I'm going to let that go. I don't have to go with that, you know. I could just be okay with how I am, for instance, you know, with no, you know, motivation or preconception or something. I'm just asking, because sometimes it seems like the explosion route is very hard on a person, but it's also very hard on society, right? Because in a way we could say we are fighting all these wars so that we can surrender. to each other. And that's a tough way to go nowadays.
But you can go the explosion road, or you can go the peaceful road, or whatever you want to call it, and it's still strategies in the mind, and you just have to realize that enlightenment or the breakthrough will not happen through a strategy. No matter what you try to do and how you try to figure it out, the way that you break through will be in a way that you would never ever have imagined. So you cannot figure it out. That's the beautiful thing about this wonderful process, that you cannot figure it out. It'll happen in a way that is totally different than what you could ever fantasize or make strategies about.
I'll say another thing about Occupy, because I had been going down to Occupy maybe once or twice a week, especially when the better weather was, and I actually brought my camera and I talked to people and sometimes filmed people talking, and maybe I got 30 or 40 little short films. I didn't put it up on my site, but I put it up somewhere on YouTube, and actually it was so easy to speak with people. And not even people in Occupy, but as long as Occupy was there, somehow occupying, I guess is the way to say it, but it was there in its place in the city, then it was so easy just to be open to people and actually, to confront people and say, well, what do you think about that Occupy movement? Or, and then just see if we could agree that, oh, yeah, well, I don't know what it's all about, but I can see that something about society doesn't work. And then all of us, just because of that, we were more related, more interconnected, and more. And it never really crossed my mind that you could really just start talking to anybody a few months ago, But after that, I used that as a kind of like an entryway to speak with everyone. And even just the other day, I was in a barbershop and I was just started talking to a guy, how's your Thanksgiving? And I said, well, we talked about politics, but usually we would never want to talk about politics because we were always close to that subject, saying that they'll try to say they're right or I'm more right than they are. And I said, but then we, for some reason we were able to discuss things and both come to the conclusion that we didn't know. We knew something was wrong, but none of our ways were really right. And kind of what I wanted to say was that I went down there last Friday because it was kind of a nice day, it wasn't too cold. And I went to where they usually were, and there was only one guy there, and he was kind of sweeping up stuff. And it was nothing, it was kind of like I could feel that hollowness or that hole or that emptiness that really, and I walked around town and saw Christmas things and stuff like that, and everybody was into their own thing and their own little family and their own consumption of some drinks or some foods or something like that on the street, milling around, and just it was like society as usual, like 3 months ago or for all these years, decades and decades have always been just like we're all separate, and we don't really consent to confront each other or talk to each other, and somehow maybe that's the resonance the frequency or the resonance phenomena that we were talking about. But without those people on the street and saying and being there, that a whole nother context is created, an old-fashioned, an old context.
Yep. So I really think that the Occupy movement, even though it's not big, it is growing bigger and bigger, but it also has an energetic connection to the wisdom of the 99%. So some people, they can actually they can sense that there's something right or there's something we should change, but they don't have it in their day-to-day consciousness. They don't have it in their consciousness what it is about, what the hell is wrong here. But they can feel, they can sense that something is actually moving, and they can also move into a kind of a sense of a oneness through the Occupy movement, I think, because it's based in oneness, the Occupy movement. If it sticks to that, if it moves into reaction, where it says that the 1% should be terminated or something, then we have another dualistic game going on, and we won't see that back up.
Yeah. Well, actually the 99% is so many different people, and a lot of people are there for a lot of reasons, and the most reasons that usually stimulate us to move are pain and outrage. And so then there's a real tendency to try to, and that's what they say is, corporate greed. They have big signs up, corporate greed, which is a blaming thing, right? But I mean, I think that's a great reason for you and I to go down there if we find a place, or we could just go on their websites and post and stuff like that. And I posted it on my website. I said, go on the website and coach these people and talk to everybody, talk to all your friends and saying that this is really not about them. There's no them. It's all us. And then just to kind of mention that this is way bigger than any issue. And first you got to acknowledge all the issues and say there's a lot of pain, because when the system is broken, then there's a lot of injustice, and every injustice hits somebody in a different way. But then to notice that this is way bigger than any one of these injustices, and it's our chance to really reframe our society. And somehow the most important thing is to come together. And you don't even have to say you got to come together with the 1% too. Just at least get the 99 going together, right? And so then some kind of coaching can that's how I felt that I wanted to really be there, right? And put my little 2 cents into it.
Yep.
And then I don't know. There's so many things. Maybe that's a good place to stop. But I mean, there's so many ways to go. I mean, it got me to think that even the way we take responsibility and deny responsibility is flawed. Because if life is oneness, then it's a dance. And then I realized that all the mischief that's being made actually depends on the other people turning their head away, which we do regularly because the U.S. has the lowest voter turnout. And not that we would have someone correct to vote for either, because that's why we don't go out, because we say, oh, they're all the same, and it's all run by lobbies and industry, and it's basically our resignment is what empowers the 1%. And so then, in other words, every yield solicits a push. And somehow I'm scared of that too with non-duality or with spirituality, because when people say, just go in and find the vastness, in a way that's a yield which solicits a push. And that's how it comes to the manifest world, basically, if you're not really paying attention. And you and I don't watch television. We don't read the newspaper. I don't think, I mean, not much, or I never did. And so that kind of makes me want to talk about that and put that on the table and saying, let's pay attention. And that paying attention is a mind thing, pay attention to also to mind, and not, but somehow we're saying that, no, when you're in the vastness, it's magic, but hocus pocus, it's the secret, it's the law of attraction. We say all these things that, and I think a lot of people are taking that to believe that, Source, God, will fix everything if we just think the right thoughts or be still, stay in the stillness. But I don't know. I think the stillness to me just is what empowers me to move without anxiety and to make something new instead of just going back into the old anxiety formula.
But about God solving everything and making everything peachy pie, happy, clappy, it's not really what God has in intent for us in this school. We're not here just to be happy. We're here to experience life in its fullness, with all the suffering, or let's say all the pain, and all the joy also. Because suffering is when we add resistance to pain. When we experience pain directly without having any aversion to it, without interpreting the pain, then it's a beautiful experience actually. So that's also why when you hear and you get annoyed about enlightened people saying that this moment is perfect, then you say, why the hell is it perfect that kids are starving and people are being raped and killed and everything? And it's not perfect in the dualistic sense, but it's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for learning, because nobody is dying. We're just moving on always. Even when we get killed, we just move on, and we learn something. So in that way, from that perspective, it's a beautiful, beautiful setup for learning. A fantastic school which is so precise and so hardcore and beautiful at the same time. I am just flabbergasted by the intelligence behind it, really.
Wow. That's a great testimony. I don't know. I guess I'm always thinking that people can move on. It's okay, but they should. But the name of my game is that they can move on later. Hang around. I want to get to know you first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I really think that the resonance of the Occupy movement is going to change spirituality. Because I could just feel it on the streets myself. And especially since the last time I went down there, I couldn't find it. And I could feel the difference so strongly.
Yes, I can totally understand what you mean, but then you also have to see that when you cannot find it, it's because of your perception of it. You can always find that oneness. It's always here. When you look inside, when we start to look for it outside, maybe we find it in the Occupy movement sometimes, but definitely not all the time and not unconditionally. Because again, when some people, they look for happiness in a hamburger, and maybe they'll find it once or twice, but when they have the fifth hamburger, then it's not really happiness anymore. Then it's a sore stomach, or you have stomach pain, and it's the same with the Occupy movement. It's a beautiful, beautiful principle it's built on, but it does not. It doesn't bring oneness completely, because as soon as we look outside ourselves for oneness, we will lose it. Maybe we'll see it in a flash or in a couple of days, but then it disappears again. It's not constant. Like you said before, everything is changing. So it's the fundamental mistake that we try to look for oneness or spirituality outside of us. It is outside of us, but only if we are connected with Source, then we see it. As soon as we disconnect with Source, it'll move out. It'll move away. It'll disappear.
So Occupy can bring us to the door. Somehow it can bring us into that experience, and then we can realize that although it can facilitate, it can't limit. If it comes and goes, or of course, I mean, I don't know. It's just my predilection, I suppose, that it's going to be huge, because this is the perfect time to start it. Because there's all of next year is a whole election cycle here that's really going to be something amazing, and I think that Occupy will be not thousands but millions. But that's just my dream or my intention, but but also, even if it isn't, we're saying if it fizzles now and that's it, it's impossible. Yeah.
I think there's something has started, and it's not just a movement with physical people on Wall Street. It's a movement in consciousness, and I think it's not stoppable. I think it's going to evolve, and maybe it's going to take some twists that we did not anticipate. Maybe we're going to see a civil war or huge catastrophes and so on. And that's just a part of the learning process.
Well, we have models too. We have models that are all different sizes, that we can look at because, I mean, really, Occupy is not an invention. It was actually the whole idea was a Canadian, so I think I picked that up somewhere, and and uh, and and then there's the Arab Spring that we said, hey, if the Egyptians could do it, why can't we? We're supposed to be the bastions of democracy here. And then, then we had Libya and Syria. We had wars and a lot of senseless killings and stuff. So we have all the models to learn from and to look for. We don't really need I don't know if we really need to act it out.
I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea. I just really hope that the Occupy movement can stay with the principle of nonviolence. That would be beautiful, and the only way through.
But that takes you and you're in my coaching too. I go out on the street and we just say it, but a lot of people are saying it louder than I am, and I think the same thing's happening and it's going to happen in Europe too, because there's so much financial stress or stress on our monetary system, and that so many people are going to suffer from that, and so people are going to rebel against that and say, why is it here we're supposed to have one vote for one citizen, and yet we vote in a system that kind of doesn't really bring us any well-being in even a generation. We're just kind of static. And then it seems like somebody's getting something, but the rest of us aren't. So then why are we creating such a system? And I think that's going to happen, be pretty worldwide. It just catches on from one country to another. And from the universities probably will get renewed. And not only spirituality, but the universities and science might get renewed, and everything is going to get renewed, right? How can it stop?
Somehow it has to be renewed. We cannot continue this way, definitely.
Somehow it's getting so obvious because here these certain people were talking about it in the sense of, the 2012, the Mayan calendar thing. And I was always dismissing that because I thought, oh, yeah, the end of the world has happened so many times and nobody noticed. And then, but anyhow, now I'm feeling it, Now I'm not really believing the Mayan calendar or anything what anyone said or saying, hey, your prophecy came true or anything like that. But somehow I'm just feeling the resonance of it or feeling it.
I've always said that the 2012 time bandits or time criminals, there's a problem with that. People, they talk about 2012 and big things are going to happen. We're going to see, some have said that we're going to see world enlightenment and so on. And it is so important to understand that enlightenment or awakening does not happen in time. It happens outside of time. It's to go beyond time. It's to if time is a tire, then we puncture that tire and we make a flat tire of it, and it disappears somehow. That is awakening. We move into a timeless state. So it has nothing to do with an event in time. That's said on this talk about, on this theme about awakening. But as an evolution in society, then definitely we have come into a time, I believe, where big changes will happen. And those big changes in society will affect every individual in a way so that we will have added pressure towards moving into the heart or rebellion through the head or the mind, and then we will just end in disaster. And then we'll take another round with another cycle of humanity but we have the possibility now of actually seeing that these changes can push us into higher consciousness somehow. I'm not saying that we will see mass enlightenment. Definitely not. I think that the evolution of man is taking place in a certain pace. But we will see more and more people, and we are seeing that moving into the awakened state. So we will have a huge amount of people with higher consciousness, and also a little smaller amount of people moving into the awakened state. So it's exciting times we're living in, definitely.
Somehow it could be logical, because so if we have to come together somehow to solve really big problems, then a lot of our needs as a human will be fulfilled, because the circle of our relationships will be more complete, and more in each relationship will be more accepting and more tolerant and more respectful, and somehow we will know that we have to come together, and we're not in separate little groups anymore, or separate little individuals. And so then if our needs as a human species are more fulfilled, then our neediness is going to be reduced. And basically our neediness, to me, is what really throws us into our head.
Yes.
And then we're going to be able to rest and just like having a good conversation in the coffee shop or something. Yep. And then that's the opening that can allow a lot of people to actually find what's timeless, right? Because there's the necessity or the urgency is kind of like, that's the tire that we're puncturing.
Definitely, there's some people, there's a quote that the next Buddha comes as a community. The next Buddha is community. And that I believe that, definitely, and that's what you're talking about here, that the awakened state is a state about coming together in oneness and experiencing that oneness between people, and that will definitely, the neediness or the sense of lack that so many people they have, and they explain that sense of lack with not having enough material stuff, or having enough food, or having enough experiences. But the real lack we are experiencing as a human species is the lack of connection, inside and outside. So if as you say, we come together as communities with a shared purpose, then we will also connect inwardly in a much deeper way. So I totally agree with you on that.
It's kind of happening for me. Like, for instance, like I told you, somehow I feel my contribution can be talking to everybody and saying, well, what about Occupy? What do you think? And then they'll say, what do they want? And I say, well, who's they? Aren't we part of they? Or what do we want? Or, like I'll just try to ask questions, right? And so then I'm allowing myself to just go and talk to people wherever. And lately I've been going to the coffee shops, different ones. I don't go to the same one. And there's one, this morning I was talking to like 6 guys that they're kind of like totally different than me, right? They're actually all from Croatia. Mostly they're speaking Croatian. I've seen them in that coffee shop for months, but only lately have I been part of the in crowd, and I always sit with them now. And they're big burly guys. And they're all landlords, they believe in real estate, property, buy the land, And they're all big building owners, and they're all in there having coffee, and then now they have to go fix one apartment up or get one rented or something like this. They're kind of like construction workers, but they're really big-hearted guys. I love them, totally love them.
Yeah.
And I just talk to them, and they say, Richard, what do you think? Tell us more, like I'm talking a lot there, and I don't know. It was something I never would have contacted these people ever. There's all these, these immigrants, right?
Yeah.
And speaking Croatian, I didn't even know if they're Polish or what, And then I had all my judgments about them, and somehow, I just most of judgment was about me, that I couldn't be interesting to them, that I wouldn't be able to get in there. And now I'm in, like we love each other, and then it's really, really cool. It's just totally cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And just to say the opposite, I'm reading a book about the bond market, and all those guys that were trading actually hundreds of millions of dollars daily, they were like beasts. They didn't trust each other, had no, they had some kind of fraternal instinct to spoof on people. But I mean, they really didn't trust each other, and they were always trying to steal each other's business. And I mean, they had no kind of communal feeling, really. And at least in that one firm that this book was written about, and they ran the whole economy, really. I mean, such a big part of it, and with that kind of a feeling, we see the results. Wow.
So they ran the economy along with the rest of us.
That away. Yes. That's a good distinction. Good, yeah. And I kind of say yes to that. I say a very yes to that, but not because we just bought things, but more because we looked the other way, and we just were resigned and said they're all bums and we can't do anything about it, and the system doesn't work for me.
Yep. And also because of the greed that we have inside of us is chipping into the collective greed. Adding on to it. So when we resolve the greed inside ourselves and we connect with the vastness, we connect with the source inside ourselves, then that greed can still be experienced, but only in the personality, and then it's just dissolved in the vastness of the source of consciousness, of awareness, and when we do that, all of us, then something shifts.
What did you mean by all of us?
Well, we have to do it, most of us, then the collective consciousness will shift and will raise the resonance. Some people will say that it only takes 64,000, some kind of what do you call that in English?
Critical mass.
A certain critical mass in order to create that momentum for the rest of the consciousness to change. And I think there are some evidence that it could be working like that. But again, the monkey story from the Japanese islands is kind of if you look into it, not really scientific. So we should more look at it as a resonance phenomenon where it's something we all have to open to. We all have to open up to that resonance somehow.
So just to see it operate. Once we can see it operating, then we can realize, oh, whoa, this is happening.
Yep. Yo.
We talked about so many things. I like to really, really pull it down and say where maybe what the origin is, and say what the practicality of it is, or what the reflection of it is. And then I think that the reflection, without the what you see is what you get. I believe that it's not manifestation reflects what's really going on. And you're saying that, I think, again and again, saying that the greed is within us.
Greed is within us. It will always be here. The problem is that there's some kind of glue attaching us to the greed. And what we have to invent as a species is a dissolvent that dissolves the glue, not the greed. The greed is okay. It's just part of human nature. But what we have to dissolve is the glue that keeps us attached to the greed, or to the lack, or to the neediness. And when that glue is dissolved, and that happens in awareness, awareness is the dissolvent, really, then things change. Again, we don't have to fight greed. We only have to dissolve the glue. And that's much more peaceful than fighting the greed.
Yeah, and I didn't imagine fighting it, but I just thought that if we're fulfilled more by opening to other people and knowing our own heart, and then the neediness is not so real.
So beautiful said, yes.
So let's do it.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, really. Okay, really wonderful discussion. I really enjoyed the topics we got into, and your very insightful comments on everything. And I'm sure other people will too. So happy that we were able to get together. And
thank you. Thank you so much for letting me be here and be in your presence. And it's been wonderful, really, to chat with you. It's wonderful. It's just happening in a spontaneous way, and perhaps in a year's time or 2 years' time, we could do it again, and it would have a lot of the same aspects, and definitely also a lot of new funny aspects we could explore together.
I think it's going faster than that. We probably could talk when I get back from Australia, and I think things will be way different already. And then Occupy will be in full bore, and who knows, maybe you'll have an Occupy Copenhagen.
We have actually Occupy movement in Copenhagen also. So they've been occupying the main square there.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's funny. But let's see the developments when you get back from Australia. Let's have a chat again.
Thank you, Bruhn.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for watching our episode here, our chat. And you're always welcome. And so check out what we're doing. I feel that there's a lot more talks coming your way. And hey, if you want to talk, you could just write me, and I'll put you on too. So thank you very much.